Welcome to Let Them See You, the podcast that honors educators, the everyday heroes shaping futures with courage and heart. I'm your host, Sarah Hightower. This is your space to recharge, find joy, and embrace your power. Yay! Episode 10! Woo! I am so happy that we have made it this far. Welcome. Come on in. Have a seat. You came on the episode that we're having a party. I am very excited. Why? Because I don't know about you, but I don't know how long this thing was going to last. But here we are, 10 episodes in. When you think about it, you got to do the first 10. What happens after the first 10? The next 10. What happens after that? The next 10. And before you know it, we're at episode 100. Then 1,000. We're going on. We're not stopping. Episode 10, BOY Testing Extravaganza. If you are in education, you know all about the BOY Testing Extravaganza. Everybody gets an exam. You get an assessment. You get an assessment. You get an assessment. Everybody gets an assessment in the BOY. Why? We need to know where the children are. People say, well, they took STAR. We can look at their information from STAR. Baby, STAR is old. That information was months ago. We need what's happening right now. We need the current data. So let's go ahead and take this assessment and see where students currently are. I love it. Let's get into a quick chat before we dig deeper into this BOY testing extravaganza. For my quick chat today, because it's a party, I want to know, what's the best party you've ever been to? I know that the best party that I ever went to was full of people that I enjoy spending time with. We had a lot of fun. There was a lot of laughter, lots of laughter involved. I love to laugh. You only live once. Can we not be so serious? It is a lot in this life sometimes. And sometimes we forget. We're just people on a floating rock. But it's okay. Chill out, right? And the parties that I remember the most are the ones where that was the attitude. Everybody was just saying to themselves, you know what? We need to relax. Just a little bit. Relax. It's going to be okay. There is plenty to stress about. So the best parties are the ones where you can de-stress, the ones where you can just focus on the fun, focus on having a good time. It doesn't even matter where the party is. It can be at somebody's house. It can be, at a venue. It can be out of the country. Whatever it is, make sure it's a good time. Have a good time. You live once. Right? If that's what you believe, right? But I do feel like sometimes our lives can be so stressful and we can focus heavily on the stress. And we really need to tap into that party energy. It's a party. Let's have a good time. We are doing the work that builds other humans. That is something to be celebrated. It's a party. Have a good time. So that's my quick chat for today. Have a party, have a good time, celebrate the fact that you are an educator. Have a good time with it. Don't be so stressed all the time. Find the joy, in what you are doing so that you are not waking up and saying to yourself, oh no, what was I thinking? Why do I have to be here? Because maybe that's not the place for you. Maybe you need a different position. Maybe you need a different location. Maybe you just need to think about the people that are around you and shift that a little bit. So you think about those things so that you don't waste so much time being stressed and unhappy. Think to yourself, where's the party? Show me the party. That's where I'm at. I'm partying. I'm having a good time. Celebrate. Okay? In just a moment, I am going to introduce you to our guest today. She is wonderful. She is somebody I actually met on a social media site, and I was just impressed by her resume and I was impressed by what she was out here doing. She seems very similar to myself, somebody that was just thinking to themselves, you know what? I enjoy what I do and I want to share that with other people. I have an expertise in something and I think other people could benefit from said expertise. Let me go out here and share what my God given talent is. And that's what she's out here doing. I enjoyed this conversation with her, and hopefully you will too. So let me introduce her to you. And we have with us today Miss Phonisha Hawkins. Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate this.
Yes, glad to have you. Phonisha Hawkins is a lifelong math educator who spent 16 years navigating the real tensions between policy, practice, and purpose. As the founder of MathEd Efficacy, she helps educators reclaim their confidence and lead from a place of authenticity. She believes student success starts with teacher truth, and she's not afraid to say the quiet parts out loud. Welcome, Phonisha Hawkins.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. I'm very excited about this
Ex-
conversation.
Very excited to have you. So, first of all, BOY Testing Extravaganza. We know all about that. So, with the BOY test, they often feel policy driven, like we have to do them. So, how can teachers make the data useful for their practice and their purpose?
I think one of the things that teachers can do is first understand why. Why are we having this assessment? And then once we have this assessment, what do we really do with the numbers? I think making sure that it's useful is understanding the data that you're getting, but also understanding the child behind it as well.
Mm,
What we tend to do in practice, I've seen it many times, is we have a BOY, we get some data, and then we just go ahead and put the kids in groups. And those groups, what does that really mean? And where is that information going? Who takes care of that data, right?
mm-hmm,
And so I think in order for it to not feel so just policy driven and for it to have purpose, understand what you're doing with that data when you're coming on the other side of it. And for me, the most useful part of BOY comes into instructional decisions. So making sure that if I have a student, we've taken the BOY, and let's just say the data reveals that they are not strong in rational number operations.
mm-hmm.
I am making sure as their teacher that every time I get in front of the students to teach anything about rational numbers, I'm keeping a really close eye on this baby if the data tells me that this is something that they're striving in. If it's an area in which they've showed strength, then I'm still keeping an eye on the baby because we use bubble kids, right? Or we used to use the term. I used to hear a lot of
Mm-hmm,
bubble students, but I think
mm-hmm.
now every kid is a bubble kid,
Yes, ma'am.
because every student has a goal that they're trying to reach. And we know what we know to be important is when we want our babies to reach that goal, we don't want them to go back.
Right.
So you have to keep constantly monitoring and checking in with your students. So I think in order to make it purposeful, you have to understand the why behind the test, first of all, the
Yeah.
why behind the data, but be able to make sure that you're taking that data and making instructional based decisions by
Mm-hmm.
student and by standard, not for your whole entire class, but by the students that actually
Yeah.
need that specific intervention or that remediation, whatever it might be.
Yeah, that makes sense. I like the way you said that every kid is a bubble kid, right?
Yeah.
You have to really have that mindset. That makes perfect sense. So, how can teachers use that BOY data to build confidence instead of feeling boxed in by the numbers?
I think that has to depend on their leaders and their administration. I think teachers will feel boxed in when it's top down and they're just given a directive from their principal or their assistant principal, even their instructional coach. And so again, it just goes back to we got the data, just put the kids in groups, and I want to make sure you're touching base with these groups, a couple times a week. So again, not having purpose behind it, which goes to your first question. And so I think confidence grows when teachers, again, understand the why behind the test and the data. Um, and it's going to make the instruction better. And so what I'm hoping that teachers will do with that BOY data is if it's an area especially that you may not be your strength instructionally. Like for example, I will admit I'm always an open book. When I taught seventh grade, probability was a thing for me, and it wasn't the strongest standard that I taught, but I had so many kids that didn't do well, and it forced me to dive deeper into the content, dive deeper into the standard to really understand what do I need my students to do. Back then, dissecting the standard, I know it's still huge now, but it was
Mm-hmm.
really, really huge
Mm-hmm.
back then. And so it forced me to just be better at understanding what the standard is asking my students to do and what I need to do to make sure that they know. So I built a lot of know and show charts around that.
Oh,
So
know
for
all
that
about that.
data, if it right. So if it's a standard that you are not strong in, take that opportunity to grow yourself and grow your efficacy, grow your knowledge, grow your toolbox to make sure that, when this standard does come back up, you are able to completely give your babies, 1,000% of you, the
Yeah.
best you, in how to deliver that instruction.
Right.
So many ways that we can continue to
Yeah.
talk about, but I think that would be the strongest way for teachers to build confidence is just making sure that you understand what the data means, the why, but also making sure that you're investing your time into the standards that you need to grow
Yes.
in as a teacher so that you can be the best teacher for those babies.
Yeah, you really have the most confidence when you know what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Point blank, period. That
Exactly.
has to be what happens. So, what are ways to humanize test data so it reflects the whole child and not just the scores?
Identity and
Mm,
agency with students, and yourself as well. I know we talk so much about the kids, but I think we also forget to invest and to pour the same strategies into our babies, into our teachers as well. And so making sure that there's identity behind it. The problem that I have a lot of time with BOY is it's at the beginning of the year. You're just getting to know your kids. And
mm-hmm.
so you may not know that, Phoenicia, um, you may not have all the details of my IEP, for example.
Right.
And so you may not know, the struggles that I might have in math or the concerns that I might have in math. And so even though we're taking it at the beginning of the year, make sure that you get to know your students. Make sure you get to know their needs, what their likes, their cultural backgrounds, how you can bring those things into the classrooms. That way you can make the math relevant
Mm-hmm.
to them at any given time. And so just making sure that you're connecting their identity. And there's a child behind that, and they're not just a number. It's
Right.
it's not just a number. My concerns with BOY will always go back to the why
Mm,
behind all of it. And once you understand the why behind all of it, you can then begin to just make better decisions for yourself and for your students. But making sure that you understand that the child behind that number, there is a child behind that number,
mm-hmm.
and don't just treat them as a score.
Right.
We hear a lot about data conversations, and so making sure also, I think, to humanize is to have conversations with your babies throughout the year. A lot of times we get to the end of the year, right before STAR or before that assessment,
Yeah.
and then we want to start having conversations. Well, you haven't talked to me all year
Right.
um, about my data, so now that it
Now you want to talk.
matters, now you want to have this conversation. So humanized by, again, the why, but also another component that we can add to that is understanding that the child does deserve the conversation. They do need to know where they are, what their goals are, and making sure that you're helping them reach those goals.
That makes perfect sense. When you say bringing the child into the conversation, it's not just data for you. They need to know where
Mhm.
they're at so they can take some ownership in getting themselves to the next point. But how do they know where they need to get? You have to tell them. You have to show them. They don't just
Correct.
know, right? And then when you think about it, this is the beginning of the year, so these assessments are not necessarily tied to information that you know about the child yet. You're still getting to
Right.
know them. But if you are taking into account where they come from and what backgrounds they all have into your instruction, that just helps them know what to do in the future, right? And how to grow themselves. And formative assessment is assessment for learning, not
Yes.
assessment of learning.
Correct.
So you need to use that information to help you make instructional decisions. That's what
Absolutely.
that's what you do in the beginning of the year.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
I think too, to connect what you said, sometimes these things become like a checkbox or like a list. And when we bring things in or we pose that information, even as leaders, as teachers, in that way, it takes away the human connection, of it. Because now I'm just checking a box, I'm checking this off my list so I can have it done. So my AP, my principal ain't got nothing to say to me about it. But making sure, just like you said, that you bring in a child into that conversation, consistently, and all of the time, and reminding them of their goals, allowing them to track their goals and help them understand why are we making this goal.
Hmm.
And start that in the beginning of the year. Don't wait to the end, because at the end, as a kid, you ain't said nothing to me all year. You need me to get 10 points. Why do I care about that? You hadn't said nothing all year. So, we got to keep it consistent if that's what we want the children to learn. And I think it teaches them to be accountable, and
Right.
for them to
Ooh,
understand, again, the why is so important behind everything that we do in education.
yes, ma'am. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready for anybody to
Absolutely.
ask you the question. You just know your
Absolutely.
kids. It's a beautiful thing.
Absolutely.
In math, how can BOY data help teachers prioritize skills without the pressure to cover it all?
Ooh, good one. I think about and I'm going to assume this is nationwide, but I know in Texas it's always going to be seventh grade math. It's
Mm,
always seventh grade math, because there's so many standards, and it's so heavy with fractions, decimals, percents, all the rational
yeah.
numbers, all of the computations, all of them. And we put so much on seventh grade. And so I feel like um, what we can really do there is, I think it goes back to the other question you asked about confidence, making sure that we understand our standards and we become masters of our content. And becoming a master of your content, you also have to know what are the scaffolds needed,
Oh,
and
yes.
where are my kids, what should they come to me with, and
Mhm.
then when they leave my room at the end of the year, where am I sending them, where are they going? And I think once teachers are able to compound all of that and really think about those things in the through line and how it really does make a difference to know, I think that teachers become stronger in their standards, and they're able to prioritize, let's say, I'm thinking simple and compound interest for seventh grade.
Mhm.
That is one question on our STAR test. It's not the power standard, but it does come with rational number operations. And so I really feel like making sure we understand the components of our standards, of our TEKS, and what we need our students to know, and how are they going to show us that they know those things. But also, like I said before, making sure we understand the scaffolds and where's this
Mhm.
going to go. Because we do love to say the teacher before us didn't teach anything, because they should come with,
Ooh, that's a
right?
word.
So what was they doing in sixth grade? The high school loves to blame middle school
Yes,
loves to blame elementary school, right?
right.
I think making sure that we understand the standards and what do our kids need to know, for success. I know in seventh
Hmm.
grade, sixth grade, and eighth grade math, it's going to be heavy proportional reasoning. So I want to make sure I know all of my standards that are connected, what my babies need to know for success. It's so many things. We could talk about this for days, but making sure that we understand our standards completely. And if you don't, you should get to
Right.
know your standards,
It's
because
time.
yeah, you can't teach these, you can't teach these days and not, be a master of your content. Because if you're not mastering your content as a teacher, you're really doing a disservice to the kids that are in front of you.
Right. Hmm. And to yourself.
And correct, and to yourself.
Yes. So, how can teachers use assessment results to advocate for students and themselves authentically?
Making sure that you and your students have what you need. Um, if my BOY data is reflecting, it can't necessarily be something about my own teaching, because it's the beginning of the year. I haven't taught much
Hmm.
yet, but what it can do is it can advocate for me areas where I'm strong, and areas where I'm weak, areas where I know I need to spend more time. So for example, in sixth grade, I've seen some pacing guides that have like a week or 2 weeks for financial literacy in sixth grade, which is nothing more than the kids knowing the difference between a credit card and a debit card, and pay your bills on time, or it's on your credit report for 7 years. If I know that my pacing guide has that for 2 weeks, but I know I need to spend more time based on my BOY data on volume of a rectangular prism,
Hmm.
I can advocate for myself by saying, to my AP, my curriculum person, whoever that is, like, hey, this is what my data looks like on my BOY. I think I need to spend more time here on these particular set of standards versus spending, the 2 weeks, because I know if I'm looking at the lead for a frequency chart,
Mm-hmm.
it's only one question. However, I know that geometry and measurement can be up to 30% sometimes of this test. So having that information, you're able
Yes.
to advocate for yourself. For your students, I will always be a point of giving the babies what they need and giving the teachers what they need to be successful. For the exact same reason, if I know my babies have to get these standards on geometry and measurement, I don't need to spend 2 weeks on a credit report and the
Correct.
difference between a debit card and a credit card. So I think it's the same exact reason, knowing what you and your students need to be successful and using that BOY data to be able to do that. I've learned, a friend told me to make sure when you're having conversations to quantify your reasoning, because when you can quantify your reasoning, people don't argue with that. They're not going to argue with numbers.
Mm,
So being able to say like, hey, on my BOY, I only had, 12% of my kids master the standard. I have to be able to get X amount of percent for whatever that you requested me to
yeah.
get. So I need to have this time to be able to do that, and these materials as well. Instead of kids just, for example, like even last week, I had a lot of my sixth grade teachers in our standard. They were doing volume of rectangular prism. I said, well, go get cereal boxes. Have the kids bring cereal boxes from home. Bring their home into the classroom
Right.
and let them measure that instead of just doing it on a textbook. Advocate, for
Mm-hmm.
learning for the kids, but also what's going to help increase teacher efficacy as well. So your BOY data can definitely do that once you know how to quantify that.
Right. That makes perfect sense too when you think about using numbers to explain yourself and advocate like,
Mhm.
hey, based on the facts, this is what needs to happen. I don't know any leader, not the good ones, that would
Okay.
be like, no, no, we're not going to do that. That doesn't make sense. And it also comes from the top, though. If you are
Yes.
in any educational organization, somebody at the top has hopefully looked at something like the lead forward frequency distribution chart and said to themselves, ooh, this type of question shows up a lot, whereas that one doesn't. So this is probably not a priority as far
Mhm.
as the standards are concerned. Let's focus on this one over here because we see this a lot. There's some importance there. They really need to know that.
Yeah.
Yeah, somebody somewhere has already, hopefully, looked at
Right.
all of that information and made some determinations as to what you focus on. And that should be there in your pacing guide. There should be some type of delineation between here are the important standards. You need to know them, but here's the priorities. You really need
Right.
to know these, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be there somewhere. If it's not, that's you. You're the person. Okay.
Yeah. People will argue with feeling, but if when you
Yeah.
can put numbers and data to it,
Yep.
you can't. Now you have to prove me wrong. And
That-
if you didn't come prepared with this meeting with these numbers that I need you to come with,
right. You didn't know you were going to court today, did you?
correct? You you didn't you
You
didn't
better
know. You didn't
get
know.
ready.
Exactly.
I love that. So finally, what's one quiet truth about BOY testing data that could actually improve outcomes if you call it out?
Here's one quiet truth. One quiet truth about BOY data is after the kids have taken the assessment and you put the kids in groups, they do not need to stay in that group for the whole entire school year. Your group should
Oh my
be
God.
liquid. It should move like water. The kids should come in and the kids should come out. They should come in and they should come out. Now
Yeah.
I get it. The BOY is going to group them, right?
Mhm,
And it may
mhm,
even group them in specific groups and layers based on standards and,
mhm,
and
mhm.
reporting categories. I understand all that. Get it. However, it's the BOY. So guess what? You're going to teach these standards. You're going to teach these things. So whereas Phonisha may have scored very low on linear equations, you taught it to me now. So guess what? I no longer have to be in that group. But if
Right.
the teachers don't understand that, now Phonisha's stuck in a group. Now I'm bored. I'm getting something that I don't need because I
Mhm.
just proved to you that I've gotten it.
Right.
And let me out of this group. So, BOI is great as a baseline. It does not have to be, you don't have to be married to it. I fight that fight quite a bit. sometimes with leaders, and I'm
Yeah.
having to, and when I explain it to teachers, like, you know what, you're right, because it's a BOY. Now with the BOY, and you may have this later, we'll have the MOY, right? We'll have the
Mm-hmm.
EOY. So as
Mm-hmm.
we get throughout the year, other assessments are taken. And then here's the other one. Once you take the MOY, guess what becomes old? The BOY. So you can throw that data away. It's
Yeah.
great to
It's
have in
time to go
reference.
now.
Time to go. This is a hill I'll die on. When we start the year and people build groups based on star,
Mhm.
star was
That was a long time ago.
that was April, May.
Yeah.
It's
Mhm.
old because once you take the BOY is now your new benchmark, right? That's
Right.
what you should be moving from. So those will be my two things. As
Right.
you take assessments, even formative assessments, summative assessments,
Mhm.
that data now changes, but also please let those babies move in and out those groups because
Yes.
now you're being equitable to what they need, and
Absolutely.
you're not having your kids sit in groups and get
Mhm.
small group instruction on something that they just proved in the lesson that you taught that
Right.
I've now mastered.
You know what? When I think about the types of grouping, like flexible grouping in general, you might have certain groups that are based on the BOY data and they need to work on these foundational skills that they just don't have, right? And then you may have, I just taught this lesson and I'm noticing these kids over here didn't get it. That's a group too.
Hmm.
You need to pull them and make sure they understand what you
Absolutely.
just taught, as well as the kids that are still working on those foundational skills. Sometimes it's the same kids, sometimes it's not. That,
Correct.
for example, Sarah might be in the gifted and talented program and receiving services there, and she may have listened to you during your entire lesson, but did not understand what'd you say, rational numbers, and that she might have struggled with that. You need to pull Sarah and make
Hmm.
sure she understands those rational numbers, gifted and talented or not. And guess who else can be in that group? Your special education baby can be there. Your student that doesn't have a specific ID or label can also be in there. Your ESL baby
Absolutely.
can be in there. They can all be in the same group because they didn't understand the lesson.
Absolutely. And
Yeah.
you bring up a good point. A lot of
Yeah.
times we take for granted that our higher performing students and our GT students don't need intervention or they don't need assistance. I did a video one time where I talked about the key. It bothers me when people also group kids by like, okay, so Sarah made a 95 on the test, but she missed the one question on whatever. So just because she made a 95, we don't have to pull her for that one question. Yeah, girl, come get in this group on this one standard that you may have missed.
You
So
get
we
it.
take for granted that and I did as a teacher, like, oh, okay, my pre-AP kids or my AP kids, they're gonna be fine. They're
Mhm.
gonna be okay. But that's also the easiest group of students to regress in learning if we're not constantly feeding them the way that they need to be fed.
Yes.
So yeah, you gotta just, everybody, like I said before, every child is a priority. And it does not matter. Even if the kid that made a 20 on the test, well, maybe they got all the questions on Pythagorean theorem right. So why are they now sitting in a group just because they got a 20, but they got all the questions on they didn't miss Pythagorean theorem, they got that down. So it's got to be equitable and it's got to be based on student and by
Yes.
standard and what the baby's needs.
Yes. And so as an educator, you have to become good at your system, right?
Yeah,
There has to be a system in place to help you know, okay, I need to see these kids today because of this. And I also need to see these kids for this specific reason. And I
absolutely.
might need to check in with those kids over there because they need to be enriched. They're beyond where we're going. So how can I enrich them? I need to make sure I check in with them. All of that is going in our minds. That's why
Correct.
being an educator is a superpower. I don't
It
care what
is.
anybody
Truly.
says. Not everybody can do this. It's
No,
not for it is a superpower. The teachers
absolutely.
are superheroes, and nobody can tell me different. It is
Nobody.
nobody.
And I throw you one better. I tell my seventh grade teachers, you get into heaven no matter what. If you teach seventh grade math, you are going to heaven no matter what. It doesn't matter what you do. You're going because seventh grade math, baby,
Oh,
that's a beast.
I absolutely
That's the beast.
believe
I did it
that.
for 7 years and I don't know how I made it. I don't know how I made it through.
You survived.
don't know how I made it. So yeah, teaching is it's not for the weak.
Mm,
Don't come into this profession if you just want, summers off and Christmas
mm.
break.
It's not in order to be an OG, that was the last episode we just talked. In order
Mm,
to be an OG, you have to have gone through some things. You have to
yes,
have had some experiences.
yes,
So the OGs have seen a lot.
yes,
And so when you hear an OG tell you quickly discern if this is for you, heed that warning because nobody should be in the profession if they're not willing to do the work. And the work
exactly.
is intense, and it's not just about growing the kids, you're going to grow too. As an
Yes,
educator and as a person, when I tell you, you will grow as a person in this profession. If you're doing it right, it's going to happen. And
it
so,
is.
yes.
I agree. I read something, I don't know if it's true, but I read something that said the reason why teachers are tired at the end of the day is because we make more decisions per hour than a surgeon.
Yeah.
And so I thought about that and I was like, yeah, because if you think like, okay, first period, this lesson crashed. I gotta hurry up and make an adjustment for second period. So let me do this. Let me go make this copy. Let me cut this part out. Let me do this. Like, our brains are constantly going. So if you are not here for the kids,
Yeah.
and if you are not here because that's something that you really want to do, just don't do it.
Right. We'll help you find a place elsewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My principal used to say that if this is not right for you, I'll help you find somewhere outside of my building.
Oh,
She
that
did.
part
She
right
used to say
there.
that.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's fair.
It
And
is.
that's
It
true.
is.
Yes.
It is.
Yeah, we take this
Yes.
thing seriously.
Very seriously. It's not
Yeah.
it's not a joke. It is not
Not at all.
a joke.
But you know what, Phonisha? I like you. You come on back. Because
I will come back
you
whenever you
you're
need
a
me.
smart thinker. I see that brain of yours
Thank
turning.
you. It's hard to turn off. It's hard to turn off.
She
Honestly, I
said it's
promise you, it's hard to
BOY. So
turn
you
off.
got MOY, you got EOY. So guess who's coming back for those episodes?
I will be right here to talk about what we need to continue to do. My
Yeah.
heart, I'm an interventionist at heart. So my
Okay.
brain is always moving in terms of intervention and scaffolding and what we need to do. And this standard, and I think having taught all three middle school grade levels,
Hmm.
it's a blessing, but it's also a curse because I know what that transition looks like. And so I'm always thinking if I'm writing lessons, like, okay, what do we need to know? It's yeah, I'm an interventionist at heart. It was the best thing
Beautiful.
that I did as an educator is learn the gift of intervention because not everybody has it.
Nope. No, ma'am. Well, thank you so much. Please do
Absolutely.
come back. You're welcome anytime.
Thank you so much. I had fun. This was great, a great way to end the evening. So thank you so much for having me. I will come back anytime, I promise.
Yay. Okay. Bye. See you later.
Bye. Have a good one.
Bye bye. Thank you so much to Phonisha Hawkins. It was so great talking to you. You know how you meet people and you just vibe? That's Phonisha Hawkins. She will be back. I enjoyed having this conversation with her, and I hope you enjoyed our conversation today. She made some really great points, and we agree that it's more about the way you use the data as well. So that brings us to our tip of the week. This week's tip of the week is gather data and use it wisely. If you're watching this on YouTube, you see a squirrel with a little nut because squirrels know that I need to gather these nuts and be sure that I am ready for the winter. I'm going to use them wisely. I'm going to store them away so when I go and get ready to eat them, they're there. They're ready to go. I use them. That is what you should be doing with your data. When you gather data from students, it can be very much formative. You can be walking around listening to what they're saying as they speak about the learning that is happening in the classroom. Take note. What are they saying and how are they saying it? Did you structure the conversation well enough that you can gather the information that you need from it? If you didn't, then you need to structure it. Make sure that they are maybe using a stem that will elicit the information that you need from them. If you can't tell what's happening, then you need to show them how to tell you what's happening in their minds. I don't want you to think to yourself, man, this is too much. I can't do that. I don't have time for that. You absolutely do, because it is a much better use of your time if you on the back end plan for these things to happen rather than later looking at the data and saying, well, I'm really not sure why it looks this way. When you plan for these conversations to happen, when you plan for students to really grasp the concepts, then you know that the data that you receive is not a result of them not understanding the question or not a result of them not knowing how to think through it. You realize that it is, oh, they really didn't understand the concept itself. They really didn't master that standard. Okay, fair enough. We want to weed out the other stuff. We don't want to have to think, is it the way the question was worded? No, because we're going to make sure students understand no matter how that question is worded. And there are all kinds of resources that help you with that, right? Last week, we talked about being a resource. In order to be a resource, you have to know where to gather data. Okay, then maybe you go look. Lead Forward is one of those great places to look. Lead Forward has some great free resources that you could use that would help you plan to be sure that you can get the information that you need that will tell you where students are. You can find out on these state assessment where and how they are asking students the questions for certain standards. It'll tell you. You can even find out, as we discussed in our conversation, Phonisha and I, the frequency distribution chart to figure out what are those priority standards that I need to focus on. We're talking about de-stressing here, people. We are not about to wreck our brains and pull our hair out thinking about, oh, so much to teach. I can't get through it all. There are standards within standards that will be covered. Focus on the priority. That way, you can continue to have the joy in what you do. Celebrate. You are an educator. That is a superpower. I was not playing when I told her that. Nobody can do what a teacher can do, and everybody can't be a teacher. And that's just the fact of the matter. Everyone is not a teacher. Everyone is not an educator. There's lots of people that are very intelligent, but everyone is not an educator. Everyone can't teach someone else what it is and how to do it. That is not easy, but you can. That makes you a superhero. There you go. Celebrate. And don't forget to rediscover your joy, embrace your true self, let them see you. Thanks for listening to Let Them See You. Until next time, climb with courage, stand in the light, let them see you.